And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Welcome aboard. I'm National Weather Service Meteorologist Peter Chan with your Alaska marine weather for this Friday, February 9th, 2024. And this is the outlook for the weekend for Saturday and on Sunday. But to start out with the ice edge on this Friday, we are seeing that the ice is decreasing in coverage here across Bristol Bay and on up into Kuskokwim Bay as temperatures are warming. We've had wind action as well. Temperatures are above freezing down along this area and will continue to be so this weekend as low pressure tracks from this region cutting near across Cape Newingham and then up into the lower Yukon interior before heading northward just outside of Norton Sound there, kind of between Nome and St. Lawrence Island. By the time we get into Saturday night and early Sunday morning. Also, the ice that had reached its maximum extent here over the past couple of weeks here down into almost the middle of Cook Inlet is also going to have a tendency to want to shrink back as temperatures above freezing are streaming northward now up through Cook Inlet and eventually up through the Susitna Valley. Looking at low pressure this afternoon and late tonight into early Saturday, that low will be crossing there right around Cape Newingham and then working its way up here through the lower Yukon Delta during the day on Friday. And the front that's arcing out ahead of it will push further inland up toward the Alaska Range, bringing gusty winds still along areas of the Gulf Coast. Panhandle, still potential for some moderate to locally heavy snow northern Panhandle tonight into early Saturday morning. And then by the time we get in Saturday afternoon, that low continues working its way slowly northward. And that feature will have a tendency to further weaken by the time we get into Sunday in the overall storm track. There'll be a few other lows coming up out of the North Pacific across the eastern Aleutians, the Alaska Peninsula, and then brushing the southwest coast as they track more toward the north-northwest. High pressure will eventually reestablish itself early next week over the Yukon, but for now, we've had the one front that'll be working its way inland and weakening on Saturday. By Sunday afternoon, we have a weak low, secondary-ish kind of low just east there of Kodiak Island, and the one low that was crossing the lower Yukon Delta working its way up there along the western coast of the Seward Peninsula. Another fairly deep low, 962 low in the North Pacific. That'll be the next one of consequence that works its way northward, taking aim to the same general region here early next week. So marine forecast for Saturday, inner channels of the Panhandle. Winds will be southerly, 15 to 20 knots. Dixon entrance area, waves could be as high as 9 feet, but mid-channels here around Stevens Passage on up to Lynn Canal, 3 to 4 foot waves. The outer coast winds will be south or southwest, 15 to 20 knots, and swells generally in the 16 to maybe as high as 19 feet over toward Cape Suckling. And then on Sunday, winds will be southeasterly mid-channels up through Lynn Canal, 15 knots, waves a few feet, and then north winds 10 knots around Ketchikan and Metlakatla. The outer coast winds onshore westerly 20 knots south of Sitka, and westerly there west of Gustavus 15 knots with waves running right around 10-12 feet. The northwestern Gulf, still some brisk winds. Winds will be 25 knots southeasterly there within the broader area of Prince William Sound, 6-foot waves. As we go down here in lower Cook Inlet, we'll see winds 35-knot gales from the south with waves running around 12 feet. And those winds, northerly wind or southerly winds, will fall to 25 knots there through upper Cook Inlet. But it's all transporting milder air above freezing temperatures across south central this weekend. For Sunday, winds will be southeast 20 knots within Prince William Sound, waves 2-3 feet. Northeast winds, though, coming down out of the upper middle Cook Inlet, easterly winds to 20 knots with waves running right around 5-6 feet at Kennedy Entrance. And then along Kodiak Island, look for southwest winds 30 to 35 knots. And then the rest of the way down along the Alaska Peninsula, southwest winds at 30 knots, waves running anywhere from 8 to 10 feet, the lower portion of the peninsula in the North Pacific, but 16 to 18 feet well off of Kodiak Island. And then for areas of the Bering Sea on the north side of the peninsula, we expect waves 8 to 10 feet. And for Sunday, winds are going to develop a southerly component along the North Pacific side at 15 to 20 knots, but more of a southeasterly winds, 15 knots here on the north side of the Alaska Peninsula. And across the Aleutians, we're just going to kind of see eastern Aleutians, southwest winds 25 to 30 knots. Westerly, mid-Aleutians 20 knots, and then going back toward the northwest at 20 to 25 knots once you get well west of Adak. And for Sunday, winds will be south-southwest around the eastern Aleutians, Dutch Harbor area, turning westerly Nikolsky westward through Atka, and then northwesterly just west there of Adak through Shemya, and waves not especially impressive for the time of year, 6 to 8 feet on the North Pacific side, maybe 8-9 feet on the North Pacific side, and then 6-8 feet on the Bering side. For the southwest coast, the ice coverage has been decreasing due to warmer temperatures, wave and wind action. Still 30 knot southwest winds into Bristol Bay, westerly winds to 25 knots into Kuskokwim Bay. And as the low works its way here across the lower Yukon Delta, northeast winds on the backside, 15 to 20 knots along the lower Yukon coast and out of Norton Sound. North winds there at St. Matthew, 25 knots with 8-foot waves. Sunday, winds fall off, becomes a little less organized. Southeast winds 15 knots, Bristol Bay, Kuskokwim Bay, waves maybe 1 to 3, 4 feet tops. Variable 10-knot winds in the vicinity of the Pribilovs. Still north winds 25 knots, St. Matthew, but then we have south winds within Norton Sound, and then west-southwest winds 10 knots there outside along the Yukon Delta. On the north side of St. Lawrence Island, the west coast of the Seward Peninsula, south of the Bering Strait, north winds to 25 knots. Lower Chukchi winds 15 to 25 knots. Strongest there around in Cape Lisburn up toward Utqiagvik, northeast winds to 30 knots. And then along the Arctic coast, east winds 20 to 25 knots once you get east of Utqiagvik through Kaktovik. And for Sunday, we're looking at east-northeast winds along the Arctic coast, 20 to 25 knots. Could be as high as 30 knots there offshore from Wainwright. And then as we drop down through the lower Chukchi, winds fall off 10 knots there around Point Hope, but pick up again to about 20 knots passing through the Bering Strait to the north side of St. Lawrence Island.